Sounds good.
All right, here we go. Got the people funneling in. Good morning, everybody, or good whatever time it is in whatever part of the world you're in. For those on the East Coast, on the West Coast, it's 8 a.m. And for those in Europe, it's 6 p.m. or 4 or 5 p.m. John got automatically admitted into the meeting, even though you were not welcome here, John. Let me see if I can make you into a participant. Let's
Oh,
see.
sorry, guys. I was trying to join as a participant and it just
That's okay. We're
have you guys
live
already started?
too.
Oh,
Yep, we're live.
hi.
This will stop happening at least by the 15th time we do this. I feel like we do that on every single one of these. But super excited to dive in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. This is our first hotel specific piece of content that we've built. And that's mainly because Javier here on our team, who's one of our senior SEO managers, has really built up a lot of content and really built up a lot of context and authority on the category. So we wanted to give him some time to share some of the things that he learned. So what we're going to be going through today, Javier, if you want to share your screen, I'll do a quick intro. Um,
Yeah, sounds good.
yeah, awesome. And what we're going to be through today is hotel SEO and generative engine optimization, which is GEO best practices. If you don't know me, I'm Brennen. I'm the founder, Brennen Bliss. I'm the founder and CEO of Propellic. We're a marketing firm that specialized in travel and tourism marketing. We have probably more visibility into the consumer purchase journey in travel than any other agency that works with private travel companies across everything from OTAs to tour operators to hotels and airlines, etc. And today I'm here again with Javier, our Javier Hernandez, a senior SEO manager here, and he works heavily with the hotel segment at Propellic. So what we're going to do is today talk about how travelers find hotels, how it's changed, and how it's changed more in the last year than the last 5 years combined. And then finally, giving you a real plan to walk out of here with, not just a list of concerns to have, which most other content on the topic is. So, got a question for everybody. I think John somehow is not. Let's see. I'm gonna revoke co-host permission. Maybe that'll do it. All right, cool. I hid him. John, if you turn your microphone on, everybody will hear you. Just a heads up, but we don't see you. Um, so first question for everybody, I'm going to put out is just a quick poll on who's joining us today. So if you open up the poll that just popped up on your screen, it's going to ask you if you're an independent hotel or flagged or both. So an independent hotel, again, you don't have Marriott or Hyatt or Hilton along your name. An independent hotel, even if you do have a loyalty program like Preferred Hotels or leading hotels or small luxury hotels of the world, for instance, those would be considered. Oh, I got to click launch. There we go. Um, Independence. So let us know what you are. And then for those of you who are property management groups, I see a number of you in here. Let us know if you're managing both flagged and unflagged hotels. So while that comes together, I'll talk a little bit on slide 2 about how we'll split up today. If you don't mind advancing, Javier. Perfect. Okay. So I'm not leading today. You're welcome. Javier is. Uh, I'd like to take you through the business case, why this matters, and what's at stake. Javier is going to get into the mechanics. So we're going to be talking about, for instance, how AI actually decides who to recommend, and then he'll run some live tools on screen so you can see this working on real properties. So what we're going to start with is, oh, Javier, you've got how this guide was built, or am I out of order on the? No, here we go. So what we're going to start with
Yeah,
on this slide is four parts. So Act One in the prior slide, sorry, if you can back up one more.
yeah,
So part one, we're going to be talking about the new search reality. Part two, why it matters, the business case. Part three, the key insights that every team needs to know. And then part four is what you can do about it. 7 topic deep dives, and we'll go live into all of them. And then we'll leave room for Q&A at the end if we've got the time. So feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A panel that's built into this chat, and we will get to them together. So I'm gonna hand it over to Javier to talk about the shift.
yeah, sounds good. Before I begin with everything, I just want to talk a little bit about how I put all of this together, how we put all this together. Basically, what we did is we have a portfolio of hotel clients, and they were asking questions, and we noticed that a lot of the questions were pretty similar. So how this started is we put together a document with all of the questions that we were being asked by all of our clients, And then after that, we were able to like not only put together all the responses and leave it as a guide for them to be able to access whenever, but then we also started including the things that we were seeing within the industry, and we were able to get some great takeaways from it. So this is grounded on the things that we're actually seeing happening day to day, and it's also grounded on the questions that other properties are typically asking about the topic very regularly. The very first thing we want to walk into is basically the shift that's happened ever since ChatGPT launched, and we're starting seeing all of these AI models take over. The way that it used to work is that we used to get 5 blue links, right? The way that you see here, and then now the way that we're seeing is you ask a question either to ChatGPT or even in Google now, and you start seeing a bunch of recommendations come through. People get their informational questions answered pretty much immediately, and then they get the recommendations in a way similar to this. We have an actual example of what that would look like, basically. So we have the question, what are the top luxury beach resorts in Ocean City, Maryland? And basically what that looks like now is you get the AI overview first with the recommendations, then you get the sponsored results, and then you move on, and then the very first thing you see is TripAdvisor, then you get to the local business pack, and then all the way to the end, you start getting to the actual results that you used to get before. So yeah, the landscape has definitely changed in how all of this works. And this is happening basically across the board. If you're searching ChatGPT, you can expect a very similar response set from all of this. So
I was just gonna add one quick note. So like when we look at that, one thing that would be helpful to make sure everybody hears is, and people are no longer just going to see a list of companies and choose before they know anything about it. They're already getting the context. AI is already making the cut for that person. So you can see the context is in there, whereas prior they would have to go and look at your website. So much quicker discovery and much quicker decision making, and you really only have one chance here. Back to you, Javier.
Yeah. Another thing on that is that if you notice here, you're actually the recommendations that you're seeing from Google AI Overviews, at least in this case, it's the actual properties themselves. So you're not getting, if you actually go and click through this, it's taking you to the actual hotel. It's not taking you to Expedia or TripAdvisor unless you actually want to. The result that's being surfaced is the actual hotel website. So it does present a pretty significant opportunity if you're able to show up for all of these terms.
And if you go to propellic.com/research and download a study we did late last year on how consumers are purchasing in AI mode on Google, which is the surface that's more AI driven, if you click into it, it's very clear that direct is winning still. Well, at the time when we did that study, we're actually refreshing the study, but it's confidence inspiring for the independents and terrifying for the OTAs and distributors, that the primary link generally is going to be the operator themselves, no matter what category of travel you're in. So it's exciting for those in this group. I see most of the companies and people in this group are independent and flagged hotels. So good for you.
Yeah, this is good news, at least for now. Yeah. Okay, so how does AI decide who to recommend? This is basically, we're starting getting to the weeds of everything we've learned. The very basis of all of this is whatever you say you offer within your website, what all of these models will do is that they'll go into your site, and if they can understand what you're saying, if your site is accessible, if all the technical elements are in place, then they will go out and they will confirm that what you're saying you offer, other people are also saying that you offer. And then based on that, we have a confidence score where anything over 50 is positive and anything over 70 is strong, basically. And what that means is just a correlation. So are you saying, if you say you have a pool, your oceanfront, you have wedding venues and meeting venues, are other people saying that you offer all of those things also? And this, the way you acquire all of these different things is through reviews, press, directories, and even Reddit threads. In the example that I pulled before, you can see the very first citation that they're using is Reddit to determine who to recommend here. So Reddit is important for sure. And all of these other, websites where you can get mentioned are also becoming more and more important. That includes backlinks also. So yeah, that's basically how all of these AI models decide exactly who they're recommending. All right, so it's basically two tracks, right? You need own signals and earned signals. So your own signals are basically what you're saying on your website. The site structure, clear H1 tags, your schema markup, and your page speed are all very important elements. You have to make sure that all of these models are able to understand what exactly it is that you offer, what every single page is about, and then you also have to earn all of these different signals. So from Reddit to TripAdvisor to different press and backlinks, all of these things have to say the same thing that you are saying within your website. And also on this, the biggest thing, the biggest difference here between being either a brand or an individual operator is that operators actually get to choose what they say versus brands actually having a little bit less control over that. Yeah, back to you, Brennen.
So why does this matter? It's my turn. Awesome. Let me get to my notes real quickly. So there we go. So if you can go to the next slide, Javier. Just looking at this here. So who does this affect, right? So one of the things that I want you to know, and I see the review, we have just about half independent and half businesses managing both of the respondents to our poll. So this is going to be a good news situation for some of you and a bad news situation for others. Essentially, just as you're probably used to, over the past decade or two, we've seen Marriott, we've seen Hyatt, we've seen Hilton, we've seen all of the big hotel chains take away the ability to modify your own vanity website, unless you are one of the core portfolio offerings that they have that, for instance, the design portfolio with Marriott generally gets to have their own website, right? So, but generally we're seeing the independents have more optionality on what they can do about this than the flagged hotels, because the independent hotels, when they have no parent or brand domain to lean on, it can hurt a little bit because there's less scope and reach, but also they have the ability to manage everything on their website. So there are, when you look at a lower domain authority for an independent hotel and their starting point, it can be harder for them to get off the ground, but overall they have more options. So it kind of balances out in that way because they can do anything with any page, any keyword, and they can have a real editorial calendar, which these are the things that we have concepts like co-occurrence, which we could get into. We have concepts like brand visibility and frequency that we could get into. But there's a lot of levers that independents have that and flexibility that independents have that flagged hotels don't. But then again, flagged hotels also typically start from a more advantaged start point. So it kind of balances out there. And we can go to the next slide. So when we look at what's at stake here, because obviously we have the fastest change that we've seen in travel, frankly, ever in my career in terms of how users are researching and planning. When AI visibility is neglected, we see a couple things happen. Number one, the direct bookings turn into indirect bookings. If you're not visible, then that is going to be a problem because you're going to do whatever work you're doing and you're going to lose the relationship through an OTA. You're going to lose the relationship with the person. We're also going to lose the commission, right? So if you're doing any amount of work, ideally, we do what we can to get the direct visible. This is not news to anybody. You also, if you're managing things on your own and managing your narrative, AI models tend to so there's two different modes on an AI model. If you were an early user of ChatGPT, people, you've heard me say this before, most likely, a lot of the people in here, you will have remembered that a large language model, the way it works is it gets trained up into a point in time, and then it knows nothing else that happens after that. That's why when we were early adopters of ChatGPT, you would ask it something and it would say, I don't know that it happened after September 2021. Today, we're in a different environment. Today, these large language models use search. So if you go on ChatGPT and say, what are the best hotels in Charleston? You're going to see it say, searching the web, and then it'll come back with results for you. And in doing that, there's really two modes. the model that doesn't do the search, sometimes you're not going to get a search. It's going to look at all the corpus of information that's happened ever. Anything it's ever got, anything that's visible on the web, and it's going to use that to advise its outcome. And if you recently rebranded, or you recently changed your service offerings, or you recently changed from, all-inclusive to not all-inclusive, or from family to adult only, it's not going to know those things. And your large language models are going to be sending out incorrect information. On the search side, it's much more sophisticated than that. Large language models lean on tools that have been trying to figure out how to surface the right content for decades, like Google search and even Brave search and ChatGPT. So we need to make sure we're controlling the narrative, because that first format, concerningly, you're going to have a lot of information go out that could be false. And we'll talk about how to address that as we get through this conversation. And then also, this is a compounding exercise. If you don't start and other people start, you're going to just have a longer race to run. And that's what it comes down to, is doing even the bare minimum now versus nothing now eventually will help you. This is a compounding, not a linear thing. Competitive moat. Here's the other thing. If you're doing things on large language model optimization, this is not to knock paid in other channels, but it's going to last. That's the benefit of compounding, right? So if you're going to go out and look at what are your options, can you put $1,000 into paid media or put $1,000 into organic? I would obviously always say try to distribute amongst channels and don't be too channel dependent. But the work you do in organic, the work you do in generative engine optimization will have permanence. The work you do on paid stops the moment you stop spending. So you really want to make sure you have both, because paid is quick return, quick outcome. It has its place. Generative engine optimization, SEO, also 1,000% has its place. So that's what I would say, is just make sure you're thinking about and working on these things. And Javier is going to give us the actual actions after we get through some of the insights.
Yeah. Okay. So these are basically the 9 things that we're going to be looking at now. The 9 things that we think your team should know. I'll be quickly walking through most of these. The very first one is what we already discussed, the confidence scoring. Basically what most of this presentation is about, just making sure that you're sending all of the right signals, both internally and externally, and keeping that consistent. The second one we already slightly touched on is that Reddit is a real visibility lever. And again, in that example that we looked at before, Reddit being the main recommendation, this happens quite regularly. This does get shown very often, and it is part of what other people are saying about you, which is what alludes to what Brennen was saying before, just trying to keep up with your narrative, and making sure that not only are you being recommended regularly, but also another important metric to keep in mind is sentiment, where if you might have 100% visibility on every prompt that you care about, but you might be being used as a cautionary tale, which is something you want to avoid, right? You want to have positive sentiment. You want this AI models to be recommending you rather than telling people, hey, this is a place you should avoid, which is why you should also keep an eye on like what people are, saying about you, not only in Reddit, but, externally in any review site and things like that. The next one is your H1 is probably your highest ROI fix. The reason we say that is because your H1 is basically the biggest signal you're sending on what this particular page is about, or this particular section of your website is about. And we recommend is not using very generic H1s for your accommodations page, just calling it accommodations. Just try to use whatever identifies your hotel as part of what the H1 is. So like, if, for example, if what you're identifying item is like what we're seeing here, the beachfront specific identifier, you should say beachfront accommodations, something like that. Something that actually attracts people, and it might actually be a search term that then other people can say like, yeah, this is a beachfront hotel, and then all of those signals are being sent the right way. The next one is rebrands need citation cleanup. We see this happen a lot, and Brennen also spoke about this a little bit. Hotels go through changes, right? You might be part of a chain and then break away from that and become independent, or it can happen the other way around. And when that happens, the name of your hotel changes, some of your amenities might change, some of your pricing might change. And you have to be very careful with that, because you don't only have to be very consistent with the change within your website, but you also have to go and look at all the other places that are using your hotel and citing you outside of it. And then also make sure that they are saying that they're saying your new name. They're saying, hey, like they have this new amenities. This is the new pricing. They're pet friendly now, for example. So all of those things are important, and you have to make sure that once something like this happens, everywhere else is also saying that it happened. Because we have seen several times, like there's hotels that go through like several name changes, and we see AI models still referring to them from the name they used to have 3 years ago. And that's because of everything we're seeing, where like all of these external mentions are being, retrieved, and then it's deciding to believe that the external mentions have more value than whatever the website itself is saying. So
I was just going to
yeah,
add, it's the same issue you see with whether it's GDS or like even agent payments and commissions, is that hotels have like 18 different names, especially if it's a flagged hotel. It's like Courtyard Inn by brand, Courtyard Inn, the Courtyard Inn, or
exactly.
Alaska, whatever. And it's just like all of those things. And what each of those does is it creates a separate entire entity for the large language model to understand. So to the extent you're able to consolidate and use the most consistent name every single time, do that, because that means you're not having to spread your work across 10 different names. You're spreading your work across one, and it has more of an effect.
Exactly. Yeah. And you also be way ahead of the curve because we keep seeing it happen across the board. So yeah, if you're doing this right, you're doing it better than 99% of people. Okay. The next one is wedding and events pages are being under optimized. We say this specifically, and this also goes into the next one, where specifically for events, you should be planning on optimizing it at least 4 to 12 weeks before. But if you're planning for bigger events, like I think the best example I can think of right now is if this summer the World Cup happened, right? So if you were planning on leveraging that because you're in a host city or something like that, you would probably have to have started creating content and building out all of those pages since the beginning of the year to have a chance to like do well organically by this point in the year. The World Cup is almost over, but like by June. So it depends on the type of event, but for more competitive events, you need even more lead time. And then with weddings, something very interesting that we've seen is that AI models specifically, they prefer to recommend actual wedding venues that are not necessarily hotel related over hotel venues. So this can do two things. Like it can give you an opportunity if you're able to create individual pages for your wedding venues and they have their own individual name, because then we've seen that works. So instead of saying like the name of your hotel and wedding venue within the H1,
I
name
think it could
the
be, I
venue.
was just going to say, like, an interesting thing, just this is conceptually not something that we've tested, but if you were able to rebrand or create a special brand for your wedding venue, like the blank at hotel name, and
Exactly.
that's like a separate entity nested within. Because if you go look at Google business profiles, which by the way are frequently what is being pulled specifically in AI mode, you'll see that you get stores inside of malls, and that's the same exact model. They link two properties together. It's the Zara inside Barton Creek Mall. So that's what you might consider doing it with your hotel and your is brand your wedding venue.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. The next one is AI referral traffic converts really well. At least in terms of bounce rate, we've seen it have very low bounce rate. So 20 to 30% bounce rate, which is very low. And this makes sense because people have already basically gone through the research phase of it, which is where people used to bounce off, right? This again alludes to what we were speaking at the beginning, where before you used to have to go through 4 or 5 different pages and different websites to decide which hotel you liked, and you had to compare them, and then you would drop off the ones you don't like, and then you pick the one you like. But now each one is attached to a description, and it has reviews and the location and everything. So people make the decision before even like having to go into the website. So once they actually land into your site, they're more prone to staying in there, right? So that obviously that helps with conversion rates. Event calendars, wasting crawl budget. We've seen this. We included this here because we've seen it a lot, where you have hotels through the year, events through the year, and you decide to have a calendar where people can book in advance. What I would recommend here is keeping the calendar constrained to a year, because we've seen some of these calendars, never removing pages after the event happens, and also stretching out to like 2050, something like that, which results in hundreds of thousands, even millions of pages that do waste your crawl budget. And at the end of the day, you don't want all these models spending their time having to go through all of those pages before they get to something relevant. So keep it to a year, and every event page that has already passed, make sure to delete it and remove it from your site so you're not wasting your crawl budget on that. And then relaunches are high risk for rankings. This is relaunches or rebrands or site migrations. These are huge, again, because like you want to send the right signals across the board, and that starts within your website. So make sure that once you do it, you do proper redirects. And this, especially if you change your name, then you're going to have to change your domain. So then that means you do need like a site-wide redirect. Make sure your redirects are done properly, your canonicals, and all of your technical aspects are clean, because this is where I see a lot of hotels losing a lot of their value and then having to basically start from scratch once the migration happens, right? So just be very careful with it and make sure that you're doing, especially canonicals and redirects, the right way.
Yes, and I will mention about you want me to talk real briefly about the guide here?
Yeah.
Cool.
No, not
yet.
I think not yet. Yeah.
Okay, got it. My notes I put together wrong. This is my fault. Please continue.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so this is basically what we'll be covering within the guide. I'll walk you through the top 3 that we have here, but it's 7 in total, and the guide obviously has fully fleshed out for all of them. But we only have time.
The guide, this is something that's going to be accessible to everybody at the end of this. There's a full document that's accessible via the web that it's on the next slide. It kind of shows what it looks like. But when he says guide, this is a asset that we'll be sharing.
Exactly. All right, so this is where I'll kind of give you a live demo on how we are using Peak specifically to track how different properties are performing. What we do is we pick 20 to 25 different prompts, and there's a lot of research that goes into these prompts, like persona analysis and making sure that the prompts actually give recommendations rather than just giving informational responses. So basically what we do is once we have the prompt set that we want, we start tracking which brands get recommended from every response, and that's able to give us a visibility percentage. And just to make it easy for everyone to understand what that looks like here, if we go into like the main section, this visibility number, basically what it says is this property is being mentioned 67% of the time, or is used as part of the response for all of these prompts 67% of the time. And the way that it works is we've picked 25 prompts, and then you can see the prompt set here. And basically what it does is it asks this particular question, and in this case, all of them, 3 times a day to 3 different models. And then from that, we're able to say like, hey, Ashore and Princess Royale get mentioned 67% of the time as part of those responses. And what that typically looks like is we can go into any of these, right? So like which conference hotels in Ocean City have the best conference facilities, right? So here you can see that basically what the response is. And in this case, Ashore, Princess Royale, Holiday Inn, and Hyatt all got mentioned. So this would contribute to the visibility percentage. And then you're able to see what this looks like from a broader scope, right? And in some prompts, you'll do really well. In some prompts, you won't do very well. And then that's where you get to make decisions on like, hey, these are the areas where we want to start doing better, right? And then another very interesting thing to see here is you typically see all of the different sources that they're using. And this also speaks to what we've been talking about, where you can see exactly when they go into the particular websites and when they go into other external websites to verify that what you're saying is true, and then they use them as citations, right? So that's why you'll see a bunch of different sources, which is a different metric other than a mention. And again, what we were talking about before is that you want to keep an eye on sentiment, because this is basically, the closer this is to 100, it means that they're talking about you in a positive way, and that's what you want. If your sentiment was negative, you're probably being used as like, hey, don't go to this particular property because you shouldn't trust them because other people don't trust them. So yeah, that's a quick breakdown on basically how we're getting this information. And yeah, that's what you're getting. You're getting, are you showing up or are you not showing up? That's the most important thing. You should be showing up as much as possible for the prompts you've selected. And then are you showing up, close to the top, close to the bottom? Are you the very first recommendation, second or third? And then the sentiment, as I talked about, basically, are you being mentioned in a positive light? I will say you need at least 30 days of data before all of these, trends become meaningful, just because you have to ask all of these questions every day, and they also ask them to 3 different models, right? So you get to see how often you show up for Perplexity versus AI mode versus ChatGPT in the example that we showed. So yeah, that's why you need enough information to be able to start making decisions from all of this data. Okay, the next thing we have is grounding budget, which is this is something very interesting. It's based on a research that I actually have here, I think. Yeah, it's right here. So basically what they did is they asked basically the same type of question, and they did a bunch of Google searches, and they compared what AI models are showing. And then based on that, they were able to see that at least Google Gemini has a 2,000 word grounding budget. And then from that, they were able to see that if you're ranking first, you will get at least 530 words read from your page. So you get a 28% of the 2,000 word share total. So that's why we say here that if you're ranking fifth, you will only get around 266 words that are read from your main page. So,
and also interesting thought here. So put the important stuff at the top of the page, right?
Exactly.
Like it's, and also rank higher.
Yeah, exactly. Both of those things are true regardless, because even if you have 2,000 words in that page, they won't even get read towards the bottom, right? So 100%. Even if you're ranking first. So yeah, everything that's important, that's why we say the H1 is the single most important thing that you're going to do, because it's the very first thing that people see. It's the very first thing that the AI models see. So basically here, yeah, keep your important stuff close to the top and try to rank as good as you can.
And then on the keyword piece, I'll talk about the difficulty after you do the intro.
Yeah. So yeah, not all keywords are the same. Basically, what we look at here is just trying to get a good combination of keywords that have low difficulty versus keywords that have high volume. Brennen, I'll let you get into the technical weeds of it.
For visuals, if you think about exponential graphs, you can see I kind of drew an ugly little one on the here. I'll do this. There we go. So if you think about an exponential graph, it looks like that, where, if you step from 0 to 10, you're not making as much progress this way as if you step from 10 to 20. You can see there's a lot more uplift. The opposite is true for logarithmic. A logarithmic graph looks like this. So you can see moving from keyword difficulty of 0 to a keyword difficulty of 10, that's a lot of movement in that direction. Whereas moving from a keyword difficulty of 80 to 90 is a lot harder. So when you look at, Javier is going to give a brief example from a tool called Ahrefs, which uses this logarithmic function. The reason we say that is not all things are equal. So just because something is 10 points higher, that doesn't mean it's easier. That actually means it's 10 times harder to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually don't have that example ready.
That's okay.
Because I got logged out of Ahrefs. But yeah, basically what we would do is we try to get any keyword that has as low difficulty as possible, because as Brennen said, like the higher the difficulty, it gets significantly harder to rank, right? So we try to get keywords that have a combination of low difficulty with high volume. The biggest thing to keep in mind, though, is that the keywords that have the highest intent, so like the ones that have the highest chance of like actually driving users that are willing to book, are typically going to, be a lot harder to rank for, because they're very competitive. And that's where, everything else that we've been talking about comes into play. And that's where you have to start, looking into backlinks and into citations and into seeing how you improve the authority of your website. And obviously sending all of those right signals. So it just, it's basically balancing between what you're able to go for in terms of like, hey, like we have this authority. Like if you're a chain, you'll probably already have that authority, and you'll be able to compete for all of those very high intent, very high competition keywords. And then if you're an independent hotel, then you're going to have to go a different way. And you're going to have to find other keywords that have probably lower intent, but are easier to rank for. And then you still show up for those important terms. One very interesting thing here, though, is that if we go back to this particular example here, AI does tend to show independent hotels a lot rather than chains. So I would say like this is, you get a little bit more control depending on what type of query you're searching for, right? Because this one's very specific. But then, a chain is able to go for like
I'd just broadly argue that there's so much more PR and so much more writing because of the efforts that independent hotels take generally. Like we know some of the companies that we work with in some of the large loyalty program portfolios that we work with, the loyalty programs themselves. It's nice to see the level of interest in communicating the brand that exists out there, whereas you're really relying on the mothership for the flagged hotels.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next one is, again, like this is talking more about traditional rankings, which are obviously still important.
Yeah, just for everybody's clarity, to add one thing to that, Javier, when you run a search and you see Google or you see ChatGPT saying searching the web, it's using an actual search engine. I believe it's Brave Search, last time I checked, was what was identified, and someone mapped it and found that it was outputting the right answers. But really, it's doing a search. So you also need to rank in organic. And with Google, it's using Gemini. I mean, Gemini's using Google search. Like Google spent the past 20 years building an exceptional search engine. They're not going to just ditch it. They're going to use that as their engine because it's really good at pulling up the right content.
Exactly. Yeah. And something else, even Google, when they show their top results here, you'll see like the very first two that you see are Ashore and Princess Royale. And then if you move past the sponsors, when you start seeing the ones that are actually ranking, those are the very first two that also rank. So at least like you know that in AI overviews, they'll still rely on their own algorithm to decide who they trust and who they don't trust. And that's why you'll still see that those traditional organic positions are still very important in order for you to show up in all of these things. And also we still see that if you rank first, you still get like around 25% click-through rates, where if you're ranking third, it drops down to 7. So like you definitely should be trying to get as close to 1, because again, just going back to what we said before, there's also a grounding budget where there's only 2,000 words that get dedicated per query. So if you're first, you get 500 words, but then if you're third, you only get like 300 words, and on top of that, only 7% of people click through. So yeah, so just try to take the most advantage that you can, and you can get as many keywords ranking first as you can. That is basically where the money is. Okay, so then moving on to the technical foundation, and basically the main things that I would be looking at from a technical standpoint. The first one being schema markup. So basically what this is you're communicating to Google in the language that they understand, making it very simple and easy for them to like understand what each individual page is about. You can use specific things like lodging, business, hotel, organization, FAQ, and page specific type of schema like wedding service. And what this does is that it helps. And this was very popular even before AI, like where Google was using schema very regularly as a ranking factor. What this does is that it just structures the information in a very easy and a digestible way for all of these models to understand what this page is about. And what you want to do here, the way I like to think about it is that if you make it very easy for them to understand what this page is saying or what this page is about or what the offer is, you are saving them money by not having to like render an entire page and understand what's really in it. If there's structured data, that's the simplest, easiest way for these models to digest it. And they don't have to spend a ton of money trying to understand what your page is about. And in most cases, they won't even try, right? So structured data, schema markup is very important. Then having your H1 and your H2 structure. We've spoken a lot about the H1. H2s are also important, and I would try to keep them sequential. H1 goes first, and then an H2, you can have as many H2s as you want, but I wouldn't recommend having more than one H1, because your H1 is basically you're saying, hey, this is the first thing you're seeing. This is what the page is about. This is what I want to rank for. And so I would only keep that one H1 and then just make sure that the rest of the heading structure is sequential. And then canonicals, this is, again, we see this a lot with, specifically, we see it, when you've done a site migration and things like that. What a canonical tag is basically you're telling Google or ChatGPT, all of these models, you're telling them, hey, you're in this particular page and you're free to be in here, but this is not the page I want you to rank. I want you to rank this other page. So you have to be very careful with how you send these signals. You can use canonicals for, they have their use cases, but for the most part, whatever page you want indexed, you want it to have a self-canonical. And if you're using a canonical, make sure that you're sending them to the correct page. And then the relaunch checklist, again, we went through this a little bit before, but basically if you're doing a rebrand, just make sure that your redirects are in place, make sure you keep your H1s in place, make sure that you're not blocking any of these AI models from your robots.txt files, and then make sure that you move everything over, right? Your sitemap, your schema markups, your meta tags, your headings, all of it. That is, I think this one specifically with how hotels do change, names and amenities and things like that pretty often. I would say this one is a pretty big one from the guide. Okay, so there are 4 more areas that we do cover in the guide, but we won't have enough time to cover everything here. It's a content strategy, link building, local SEO, and analytics and reporting.
Okay, I'm good. I've got the next slide.
Okay.
So, one thing to remember, clearly I'm on my game today. If you remember one thing from today, I just put this slide up. This is an important one. There's 2 different modes. AI scores trust. Traditional search ranks pages. You need both. AI search scores trust in that it's what you claim about your property and what everyone else claims about you. That is where it finds and gets confidence in answering your brand as the answer. The owned signals also get you found. Earned signals get you believed. So with the organic part, you really also need to make sure you're showing up in organic search for any time that the search mode is triggered. So both tracks all the time. You can't just choose one. I would say if you were to choose one, even though you shouldn't, it would be definitely organic because that drives visibility in SEO surfaces that are still driving significant traffic, albeit decreasing. And then those rankings, as we described earlier, are where large language models get their rankings from. So you're going to want to make sure that you're there because it's driving both outcomes. Then finally, for the context, for the believability, ensure that that's where the PR comes in. That's where brand recognition, where having the same exact term about your brand mentioned everywhere. It's the reason if you go look for a travel marketing firm, you will undoubtedly see Propellic no matter what AI service you use, because everywhere we publish content, we're very clear, travel marketing firm, not ambiguous, very clear. So Javier's going to walk you through a couple things you can do in the next week, and then we're going to wrap up with some questions if there are any.
Yeah. The very first thing, as we said, we spoke a lot about this. Fix your H1 tags, make them descriptive of what the page is about, and try to make them search terms. Try to add your meta identifier to them. Then adding FAQ schemas. This is important because FAQs are, again, very easy for AI models to retrieve and understand. So make sure that you have FAQ schema. Specifically answering all of the important questions that you don't necessarily have content for. A good example of this is your hotel pet friendly? That should be in your FAQs, right? Because there's not really a good place to show that in your website. So try to keep it in your FAQs. Same as parking fees and other things like that. That should all be in your FAQs. It's very important that you have it, and make sure that your FAQ schema is done properly also. And then run a citation cleanup. Go and see if there's older names that your hotel has had. Are other people still calling you by that name? Do you have even citations that you own that you could go and change yourself today? Go and make sure that those change. Make sure that they reflect what you currently offer, not what you used to offer or what you used to be called. To just try to avoid mixed signals as much as possible, and start sending one-to-one signals saying this is who we are, and other people saying exactly the same thing about you.
Awesome. And one thing too, before if we want to go to the next slide real quick, Javier, This is the guide that we were talking about. So if you go, there's the URL at the bottom. If you want to grab that, I'll actually drop it in the chat as well. Give me one quick second. Let's see. 2026 dot here it is. So if you want to just click on it and save it, that is in the chat, guys. That is all the specifics around this. It should take you a little while to get through, and hopefully it'll be very helpful. And then if you're on your phone or something, you want to scan it and save it, that's the QR code. But we'll go ahead and go back to the fast slide. I haven't seen any question. Oh, there is a question. All right. Tom asked, do we have any research or experience to show incremental impact of widget or module level schema versus just page schema? Okay. So structured data on what exists. There's three different things. There's what structured data exists. There's what structured data Google reads and other search engines. There's what structured data large language models index. When we talk about different types of schema markup, by the way, for those who are not familiar, structured data is machine written language that helps. It's plain text written in JavaScript format typically. Sometimes it's in microdata formatted, embedded into the HTML. But really what you're saying is, here's the facts, here's the truth about the situation in very clean machine readable format. The question here is which types to use. I know someone marked that as answered. Thank you.
Yeah, it was me.
Appreciate
Sorry.
it. Thanks. So which ones to use? So there's the very high level ones like the web page, like the company and local business. And then the question is, how specific do we get? I have not looked at data very recently to see which of those specific modules are driving any with data to substantiate it. I would say it's not that much bigger of a lift to add some of the more specific ones. My argument and judgment would be if it's not in Google's guidelines, which they do have those published saying which ones you should and shouldn't use, given that Google can and can't read them. I don't think it's necessary to go and add the ones that are not visible. But there certainly is hotels, the same as property within the within all of the different modules will be very helpful in linking up external content to your site. And then also just the core business information under the local business schema is pretty critical. And then the website schema and the article schema for those two. So the website one can go either site-wide or homepage, depending on your philosophy. And then the article goes on every article. Javier, are there other ones that you can think of that you would recommend?
That was pretty thorough.
Okay, cool. See, proof to you all that I still know a little bit about SEO. I got another question here. What role do you publisher websites and content advertorials play? Okay, so I will share with you, anonymous attendee, what we've been doing in terms of publisher content and advertorials. So let's pretend we're talking about travel and leisure, right? It's significant in large language models. I used to hate PR, which is really fun to say because one of my best friends is in PR, and I love saying that in front of her just to mess with her. But I no longer feel that way. The reason being is placement. I mean, we're doing it. We're both issuing press releases and putting placements in places where it makes sense. Travel Tech Essentialist, Focusrite, a number of other articles and publishers in our space. The reason is large language models. We talked about the trust signals. Those are trust signals. Those are established brands with strong authority, mentioning your brand. But the one thing you want to do, you don't want it to just say, go to this hotel. You want it to say, this hotel is great for XYZ with the hotel name. And that's called co-occurrence, connecting the concept with the hotel name. And that's what's going to help large language models. The more and more you mention those two things together, understand that those two things should and do exist together. So takeaway, advertorials and publisher websites. Yes, I think they do make a difference a lot more now than they used to because of all the relevance. It's considered relevance engineering is kind of the term that's used for that now. And I would highly recommend looking for opportunities like that. Thank you. Oh, I can click answer live. So you all could have seen the question at the same time, but no. Well, that's what we've got today. Didn't see any more questions pop up. If you want to go to the last slide, I think we have a final slide, right, Javier?
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Okay. And if you want to ever talk to Propellic or anybody in our team about what we could do together, we are happy to. Again, we work across hotels and every other form of travel, including multi-day tours, OTAs, air, cruise, etc. We work with about 60 travel companies and have about a 30-person team here at the company and would be more than happy to talk. So thank you for being here. Oh, I got one more question. What do we feel about bookable AI? Oh, two more questions. Okay, I'm going to get these two, then we'll wrap up. How do we feel about AI being bookable? Is it happening soon? End-to-end execution of the booking, not just visible. AI can computer use. So right now, technically, AI can go and make a booking if it has your credit card information. Probably not the best way to use your AI. I know that Marriott is working with Google on their protocol for in AI experience booking. I also believe Direct Booker has done the same with Perplexity, though I can't remember for sure if I'm quoting that right. It's coming. So Yuki, you're saying Comet can now. The rails on which that happens, I have a feeling the OTAs are going to adopt them a lot quicker. So that's one big risk is if for instance we get bookable AI bookable hotels, that data feed might end up going through the OTA and the commissions will come out, the customer relationship will come out. So as soon as those tools are available, yes, I highly recommend it. We also did research that showed us that the disconnect from someone searching, I have a 2-person party, I want to stay in a suite, I want to go on these dates, and then large language model recommending a operator and then the person clicking on it and starting over has been very frustrating to the user, and they blame it on the property, not on Google for whatever reason, or not on ChatGPT. So as soon as we have those protocols ready, it will be really important to adopt them. Nothing big yet. My prediction for the future of traditional here, answer live, done. My prediction for the future of traditional organic search results is it's slow phase out over time. They're going to let the market decide. There's no reason to kill SEO right now. I mean, to kill organic search right now. It's still heavily used. That's my opinion. But again, it's just an opinion. So with all of that said, thank you all for joining. Javier, thank you so much for leading this today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.